watching the Mayor's Council on Disability Issues Employment Matters series. Today we're talking with Stephanie Cook, who's the ADA coordinator for the City of Knoxville, and we're going to be pulling questions out of a hat, and these are going to be questions that job seekers or employees with disabilities want to ask but may be hesitant to do so. Thanks for joining us, Stephanie. You ready?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So, if I request an accommodation, am I required to provide medical documentation of my disability?
If you request an accommodation, you would only need to provide medical documentation if the disability is not obvious. And I know that may sound strange, but if you don't use a wheelchair or have a white cane or something that indicates to the employer that you have a disability, then it's fair to them for them to need the medical documentation, just so they know that they can accommodate the employee to the best of their abilities.
Okay. All right. Next question. Is an employer required to provide everything I ask for as long as I indicate that it's an accommodation?
No, as employees with disabilities, certainly we have a need for accommodation sometimes, and whatever that accommodation may be, it's to enable us to get the job done. So if I ask as a wheelchair user, if I ask my employee for a desk that is raised up so that I'm able to roll under it, that's certainly very reasonable and doable to do. If I ask my employer to rearrange maybe the file or the employee room where the files and the copiers and the fax machine's located, then that's certainly something that's very doable, and we can do that. If I ask my employer, however, to buy or lease a brand new copier because it would be easier for me to utilize because of the keyboard or whatever being, tiltable or whatnot, that might be a little bit unreasonable. So as an employer, I could certainly be asked by my employer to give me some more information as to why I felt like I needed the additional accommodation, and if it were necessary to get the job done, then sure, but the employer doesn't have to offer the full spectrum of everything that an employee may want or think he or she wants, just so that the job can be done by the accommodation provided.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense. Okay. So, does the Americans with Disabilities Act mandate that employers have to hire me because I have a disability?
No, the ADA is federal civil rights legislation that gives an individual with a disability the opportunity to have a level playing field in all aspects of life, employment being one of them. So the ADA, quote, guarantees an individual with a disability the opportunity to apply and have the same qualifications and credentials and experience, whatever the employer is needing for that job. The ADA gives an individual with a disability the opportunity to apply and be treated fairly and equally as any individual without a disability, but it doesn't guarantee me to get a job because I have a disability.
Thanks. Okay. Am I required to disclose that I have a disability at any point during the process?
No, if an individual's disability isn't obvious, you don't have to let them know that you have a disability. Certainly you can, but it's not a requirement to disclose disability unless or until you get down the road and you feel like you may need an accommodation, then you would probably be disclosing in order to seek accommodation. But it's totally up to you as an employee or a job seeker with a disability whether or not you disclose that you have one.
Okay. All right. Am I guaranteed an on-the-job accommodation?
Well, guaranteed is a strong word. If the accommodation matches the individuals with a disability's need on the job, and it will absolutely get them the ability to do the job that they need, sure. But if you ask for an accommodation of, say, a 2-hour lunch break every day just because you want to have an hour to eat and an hour to nap, that's not reasonable. So no, you're not going to be guaranteed just because you ask.
Good example. Okay. Can an employer ask about my disability in an interview?
No, your employer should never ask about your disability. Your disability is confidential. It's only one part of who you are, and the main thing that you and that potential employer should be concerned about at a job interview is talking about your skills and experience and ability to do the job at hand. That's it.
Okay. All right. Is it okay if my coworkers ask about my disability?
I would not recommend anyone discuss anybody's disability just because it's a personal thing. And as a person with a disability, I can tell you that it's really no different than seeing an individual, whether or not they wear a wedding ring on their finger. Would you go and approach a total stranger or even a coworker about something personal to them about whether or not they're married and all of that? If you wouldn't, then you probably shouldn't be asking individuals other personal things, whether it's about disability or not, right? Because the bottom line is the person first. Disability is only one little small piece about that person.
All right. Who pays for an accommodation?
Well, if I'm a job seeker, I am going to ask for an accommodation, and as long as it's reasonable, the people that are trying to hire me or who have hired me, my employer, are the ones that pay for the accommodation. Okay. Cost of doing business.
Do I need to work harder than others to keep my job?
Well, that is an unfortunate, I guess, reality for some individuals with disabilities who may feel that they have to work harder to prove maybe that they can do the job. But the bottom line is, if you were hired, I'm hoping you were hired because you are qualified to do the job, and that you will work hard because you want to work hard and not because you feel like you have to prove something. You've proved it by being hired.
Very good. Okay. Should I be honest about my limitations during an interview?
Well, again, it comes down to personal comfort and preference when disclosing our own disabilities. If it's a hidden disability and you don't want to discuss it, don't feel the need to discuss it, certainly don't discuss it. I don't recommend people divulge disability until maybe they need to request that accommodation. And the only reason is not because I'm ashamed or don't want somebody to divulge disability, but it's because give that opportunity to get to know your employer or the employer get to know you before disability is even brought up. And they're going to realize how awesome you are. Mm-hmm. And when disability happens to come into the conversation, they're not going to worry about it. They're going to say, okay, what do you need? How can I accommodate you? At least that's my perfect world that I live in.
I love that world. Okay, last question.
Okay.
What should I do if I need an accommodation to apply or to interview?
Oh, that's really easy. Whoever you're applying for a job with, just ask them to provide an accommodation for you. If that's, maybe you need a little extra time to take a test, or maybe you need an interpreter if you're deaf. Maybe you need maybe time to take the test in a separate room because of whatever, test anxiety or surroundings and things like that. So whatever you need, go ahead, ask for it, and the employer hopefully will see that it's reasonable and provide that for you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
You're
This was
welcome.
Good. This was a great way to get through these questions. And
Wow, I don't like sitting here on the hot seat. How'd
the
I
sombrero
do?
didn't make you
I know, it didn't make me much more comfortable, but it was fun.
Well, good. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
thank you all so much for watching us today. Hopefully we've answered some of your questions and maybe helped relieve some stress or nervousness about taking that leap and looking for a job. You can always find more information at askjan.org. If you're interested in learning more about accommodations, there are lots of other resources in the community as well, one of those being the Knoxville Area Employment Consortium. And so that is a body here in Knoxville that is encompasses a lot of different provider agencies that work with individuals with disabilities and the whole goal is to focus on employment efforts. So there are a lot of different things out there in the community for you. So thanks again for watching today.